Hey everyone, I'm Ashleigh Banfield and this is Drop Dead Serious. There's a weird true crime story that is percolating, and a lot of you have been talking about it, and I have heard you. I've done some coverage on this as well, and I keep thinking any minute now we're going to find out more information about what happened to Brooke Hanlon. I got your attention. I know. Brooke and her husband Conor are from Chester Township, New Jersey. They live on Pottersville Road. They have a baby named Avery. There's a really cute picture of them from just this last Christmas. Clearly, brand new family. So imagine our surprise when there was a murder on Pottersville Road, but the police wouldn't say who for days and days and days and weeks, like 3 weeks. It didn't make any sense, right? Like, it just didn't make sense. A woman was murdered and you won't say who it was who met this horrible fate, presumably stabbed in the chest, if we're to understand from her husband's 911 call. Oh, yeah, there was that. There was that 911 call that was super weird. I mean, in the beginning, I shared it with you in a previous episode. Conor Hanlon called 911, freaking out on June 6th, 4:29 p.m. Oh my God, what the fuck happened? Like, he was apoplectic, which I would be too if I discovered my spouse dead and bleeding in the upstairs bedroom. But it went on, and as it went on and on, a lot of you are really clever. You saw some things, you're like, whoa, wait a minute. He doesn't notice what he calls lacerations, AKA stab wounds in her chest, like real early on, like there's blood everywhere. Oh my God, help me. Doesn't really mention that. Just keeps sort of screaming and yelling, and everybody acts differently in trauma and terror and confusion and fear and mourning and all the rest. So you can't really pass judgment, but it just raises a few red flags that you start putting together with some other stuff. And there's so much other stuff. Like the police saying nothing and not telling the neighbors to lock your doors. There's a madman out there that stabbed your neighbor to death, a brand new mother. They didn't tell the neighbors that. They really didn't do much of anything, it seemed, publicly, surely, that until Dana Kennedy from the Daily Mail decided to go and investigate what the hell was going on in Chester Township in New Jersey. And then when she showed up and started knocking on doors, suddenly things started happening. Suddenly the police came out and started asking neighbors questions, but not till Dana Kennedy had done that. Not till she had come out and asked questions of those neighbors. So weird, because the 911 call indicated that this woman was dead and bleeding in her upstairs bedroom. And the police should have been knocking on doors within an hour. And that didn't happen to our knowledge, right? And we should have been told, Brooke Hanlon has been murdered, and if anyone knows anything, please contact, police in New Jersey. But there wasn't even a call to action for the public. No one was asked to call with a tip. Remember Nancy Guthrie? Please, 1-800-CALL-FBI. If you know anything, if you've seen anything, please call, let us know. Nothing in this case. And then nothing from her husband either. No appeal to the public, help me find who did this to my wife, please help me. And Dana Kennedy's going to join me in a minute with some pros and cons to that. Because there have been some crocodile tears by a bunch of liars who've gone out and begged the public for help only to discover they did it themselves. And so you could go one way or the other on that, right? A man who's apoplectic, his wife has been murdered, doesn't necessarily have to go out in front of the cameras and ask for help. Some would. Maybe others wouldn't. Some killers would. Maybe some other killers wouldn't. So it's a little hard to determine what Conor Hanlon's behavior tells us, but he's kind of MIA. Like, we can't find him anywhere, and as Dana's about to join and tell us, it's possible he went to Boston, where he's from. Brooke's family lives real close by, and they're not really talking either. And then Conor's family is saying weird stuff like, I don't know what you're talking about. Okay, yes, you do. Yes, you do. If Conor just lost his wife to a grisly, gruesome murder and she's a brand new mom and it happened in her bedroom, you absolutely fucking know that there's something. You could certainly say, we don't know anything and we're devastated, but I don't know what you're talking about. That's a big red flag. It's weird. It's all weird. Weird. Super weird. So Conor said he came home 4:30 in the afternoon, found her bloody and unconscious, not breathing. He described this wound on her chest as a laceration. Weird language to use. Look, anybody, you've never been in those shoes unless you've been in those shoes. So you might pick weird words. But again, oh my God, she's bleeding. There's blood everywhere. It looks like she's been stabbed. I don't know what the hell's going on, but there's a laceration. But that information doesn't come for quite some time in the 911 call. So again, the first thing you would think is, there's blood everywhere. Oh my God. The other weird thing is that they have this little baby, Avery, and there's no mention at all of the baby in the 911 call. So if you're a parent of a baby and you find your spouse dead, I would think the first thing you would say is, where the fuck is my baby? Oh my God, there's a madman and I gotta find my baby. I gotta find my baby. Even if you're a man, not just women, but that doesn't happen. There's no mention at all of the baby. Nothing. Not, hey, if you're barging into my house to come and help me, just be careful, my baby's in the next room over. No, there's no mention at all of a baby. Oh, that's weird. Really weird. But maybe the baby is being babysat somewhere else. Maybe with the parents. I don't know. Saturday afternoon, though? 3 weeks it took to publicly identify Brooke Hanlon as a murder victim. I haven't seen that before. I don't know why that would compromise any investigation to actually release the name of the dead woman, but they did. No suspect has been named publicly. No person of interest has been named publicly. There's been no major appeal. Help us with video cameras, images, tip line, nothing. In the beginning, the dispatchers thought that this was a cardiac arrest based on what Conor Hanlon was telling them. Again, if you're stabbed in the chest, it's going to show. It's going to be the first thing you see. But they thought it was a cardiac arrest or respiratory arrest. But at 4:42 p.m., again, he calls at 4:29, and at 4:42 p.m., the record changes, and it changes to something called suspicious death. Okay. Well, now that's interesting. Medical examiner apparently found multiple sharp force injuries. Multiple. So this wasn't just one accidental thing. This was probably an intentional murder, if that's what you're doing over and over. A week after it's ruled a homicide. And I'm like, really, a week? Because I would have known in an hour. A week it took. And again, 3 weeks to identify her. So what's made this so confusing is the silence among authorities. It's just not normal. What's made this so confusing is the silence of this surviving spouse and sort of the whereabouts. Nobody really knows where Conor is. And that's a bit strange. The other issue is that Brooke Hanlon was a psychotherapist. So there's some discussion about, well, who was she treating? Could there have been some homicidal maniac among her patients? Dana Kennedy is going to address that in a minute because it's interesting who her patients might have been and how many patients she might have had. Was this a robbery gone wrong? Because remember in Nancy Guthrie, a lot of people asked, was this somebody who was trying to rob the place and got startled and did something and then Nancy might have died and they just took the body with them, which would be weird. But was this one of those? Okay, it's like Saturday. It's midday Saturday. You know, Conor Hanlon has a job, but he was out doing errands on Saturday, and a homicidal maniac's going to choose midday Saturday in the broad daylight to come in and just do this and then take off. It's weird. A lot of weird. No murder weapon to our knowledge, but that's not to suggest there isn't one. Just nothing public about a murder weapon. It would help, though, right? If some homicidal maniac came in off the street with a murder weapon and left it behind, it would help to show it and say, do you recognize this knife? I've seen plenty of crimes solved before by things that were left behind. like a baby who was thrown into a dumpster and the towel that baby was wrapped in was held up in the media, and lo and behold, they found the person who did it. By the way, that's a whole other podcast, but it was a young teenage mom who, with her boyfriend, gave birth in a hotel room and threw the baby out. And then when she came into the courtroom, it was one of my first big true crime cases. It was in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. It was discovered that she had done it before. She had given birth secretly before, earlier on, and delivered that baby onto a doorstep of a neighbor. Had given birth in a field near her house and then put the baby on the doorstep of a neighbor. Subsequent years, gets pregnant again, hides the pregnancy from her family, and has the baby in a hotel room, wraps it in the towel, throws the baby out, and the police hold up the towel. And that's how they found this young mother. So the press is very, very helpful in solving mysteries. And if this indeed is a mystery, because it sure sounds like it to us, where are the police enlisting the public's help through the press? Like, where is the news conference to say there's a homicidal maniac out there somewhere and we need to catch that person ASAP before person does it again? That's not happening. No news conferences, no names, no evidence, no nothing. And no word about this husband. So naturally, I'm curious about a lot of things. I'm curious about Ring cameras in the neighborhood. I'm curious about what kind of neighborhood are we talking about? Because if it's a Nancy Guthrie neighborhood, we're screwed, because those Ring cameras would never catch anything in the dead of night. But this happened possibly in the afternoon, because if Conor slept all night in that home and then went and did his errands, well, then we're in broad daylight territory. So did anyone catch anything on cameras? What about flock cameras? Did we catch anything on a flock camera? Any vehicles coming in and out of that neighborhood? What the hell happened on Pottersville Road? So, like I said, Dana Kennedy is an amazing reporter with the Daily Mail. She's got this incredibly storied history. We met when she was a New York Times reporter, God, I want to say like 25 years ago, 26? Yeah, 26 years ago. And she's been following numerous beats for many, many years, but she's no joke. She gets to the bottom of it. She goes to the scene and actually ground zeroes her stories, finds out from the horse's mouth. So I called her up and I said, you broke this story, but how far did you get on it? And it turns out it's even weirder what wasn't said than what was. Here's my conversation with Dana Kennedy. Dana Kennedy, you broke this story on Brooke Hanlon, and I wanted to get your read on how weird it is, because I feel like there's not much information.
Well, first of all, thanks for the plug, but somebody had to break the story. And what happened was I saw some little item, I'm always looking around for things. I saw this item about a person being murdered, and I knew that it was in kind of this posh or Tony area. And then when I looked into it, zero information, zero. And I literally had to find out who it was I had the address. I went down the street. I mean, I looked at the road and looked who was living there, who was 35 years old, and then drove out to it, not knowing much of anything. And when I got to the house, Ashleigh, in Chester Township, the lights were on and the two cars were out front. So I actually thought, well, maybe the husband's home. I didn't know. Went up there and it was very eerie because there was no one there. I looked inside the living room window and it was all looked like it had been abandoned, disheveled. It could be that the cops had been there a few days, but I knew nothing. And from that point on, I went to talk to the neighbors. I went to talk to Brooke Hanlon's father, who lives in the same town. I went to cops. But it was as if I had to find out the information on my own. Our story was published on June 26th. Brooke Hanlon was murdered on June 6th. And Morris County Prosecutor's Office did not identify her until June 28th, which in my career, and probably in yours too, I have never actually heard of this happening. It's complete. Everything about this is weird, okay? So you can ask me whatever you want because I do know a fair amount about it, as much as anybody knows.
Let's stay with the weirdness for a hot minute, because I don't understand how and why that is, that even the identity of the murder victim in the home was withheld. I've never heard of the identity of the murder victim being withheld. Details? Sure. Gag orders? Sure. Why? Any idea why?
No. And here's what's even stranger is everybody was cagey. Okay, so I went and talked to the neighbors on either side, who themselves were totally freaked out, and by the way, continue to be freaked out for reasons that I will get into. They really hadn't been approached by the cops at all. Right after it actually happened, a cop came to one neighbor's house to say, do you have any, ring camera footage? They said no, end of story, right? So then I went to the Chester police, just kind of due diligence. Of course, they're not going to talk to me. That's fine. And then I went to the father's house. His name is Joseph Haggerty. He either is or was general counsel, pretty big top job for some big pharma.
Brooke's dad.
Brooke's dad, Brooke Hanlon's father, yes, whose name is Joseph Haggerty. And he has a beautiful large home about 11 minutes from where Brooke was living with her husband, Conor. He was nice enough to come to the door. He looked obviously heartbroken. Oddly, he did talk to me. A lot of times, would you talk to someone at the door that came?
Probably
I would
not.
Anyway.
Yeah.
But the odd part was he was cordial enough to me that I was able to say, do you know where your son-in-law is? Who's Conor Hanlon is, who's married to Brooke. And it was such an odd response, Ashleigh. He kind of said no, but yet with no charge on it, not with emotion or with frustration or nothing, just no. And then he kind of walked it back. And then because he was willing to talk, and believe me, I take this, I'm not an awful person. I get what I'm doing and I apologize for it. But he said, no, I understand you're just doing your job. And then I said to him, well, in these kinds of cases, often the husband is looked at first. Do you think that your son-in-law did this? And again, the answer was sort of off. And this is not to blame that poor guy at all. He's lost his daughter and he clearly is upset. But he was weird about it. He was saying, well, it's still under investigation. And you'd think either he'd be horrified that I would even consider suggesting that, right, or he would simply say with a certain expression, I don't know. And that was missing. If you get my point, it was just odd. Correct?
Yeah.
It was odd. I even called up the construction company where Conor had like a middle management type of position, a place called Tricon. I got the CEO, and that was equally odd. The CEO answers almost like he expected my call, didn't seem too concerned, and said that he had been working there and said he'd been told not to say anything. So they got to the head of his company and told him not to say anything.
Weird.
It's weirder, Ashleigh, because my story comes out on June 26th. And I kept in touch with the neighbors. And one of them told me that the day after I had been in Chester, okay, which was the week of like June 25th or whatever, the very day after I was there, cops then came to talk to her. Two detectives. This is more than 3 weeks after the murder. And asking her questions like, can we see in your barn? And did you hear any noise over there? Which you think they would have asked her at the
3
time.
weeks ago.
Yes. And wait, it's worse. The next day, a third detective came to speak to her, also, which was odd. And I'm just gonna divert here for a minute. You obviously remember the Murdaugh murders, right? Mm-hmm. I was down in South Carolina exactly 1 week after that happened, the first out-of-state reporter to be down there. Okay, I drove in there, not knowing anything, went straight to Moselle. Remember the big country estate where Maggie and Paul were murdered by Alex Murdaugh, or we have to say allegedly now, right? His conviction was confirmed. But I went down there, and it was a week. And I was astonished to see there's two huge driveways going into Moselle, wide open, Ashleigh. The kennels, remember where Maggie and Paul were shot? You could see them. The driveway was right there. You could throw a rock at them, wide open. I called up SLED and said, it's kind of weird. There's no crime scene tape.
Crime scene tape, yeah.
About 2 hours of that same day, it was all crime scened out. And
what?
This is not about me. This is about what happens when a reporter shows up when they don't expect it, right? Because this was real. So less than 48 hours after I land, the two Murdaugh brothers go on Good Morning America and kind of cry crocodile tears and then talk about a tip line and a reward. I'm like, they didn't say that beforehand. And SLED began dredging a creek and let everybody know about it. I'm telling you all that detail because it was very coincidental. And I tell you, it had a bit of a feeling of that when I heard from the neighbors saying that the cops had come right after I'd been there. It seemed a little performative to me. And again, I know nothing about this case other than what I'm telling you, right? But it seemed very odd. And the neighbors, understandably, are freaked out because the husband, Conor Hanlon, has not said one word, no statement, no nothing. His car was seen in Boston, and there were photographs of him that we think are of him. And then about 2 weeks ago, this weekend, his car appeared at the murder house, and the neighbors saw it. texted me and said, what is going on? And they were afraid he was going to sort of move back in there. He didn't stay long. He was there like 5 hours. Also weird.
So weird, all of it, because when someone's spouse is murdered and it is a complete boogeyman mystery,
Right.
usually the other spouse is out in front of the mic saying, help me find that monster. My God, who did this to us? So hearing nothing is very strange. And then hearing nothing from the police is even more strange. And then this trip to Boston, if that's what happened. There was some rumor, discussion, I really don't know where it went, that maybe he'd been committed to a psychiatric facility after the murder, which would make perfect sense. I would be if it were me, if that were happened to my spouse. Do you know anything about that?
We couldn't verify it. I heard that rumor right away. And, it sounds plausible. Who wouldn't want to, who wouldn't have a terrible breakdown after seeing that? But, I don't know how anyone could really verify that unless they literally saw him in a facility or if he came out and said so. In his defense, I will say that we both know that it has been common for murderers, of their spouses or children to come forth and act like the grieving parents and put on a
True.
big show like a Susan Smith or who's the first name of the Watts guy in Colorado? What was his
No,
first name?
Chris Watts.
Chris Watts,
Yep.
right?
Yep, crocodile tears.
Those people that are coming out immediately, right? So, but the thing is, it's like, and then the other rumor was that because she was a psychotherapist, it was some, crazed patient. Anything's possible, as you know, Ashleigh. But the thing is, she'd only been back in Chester Township, which was her hometown, not Conor's. He's from Boston. She'd only been back there 2 years. She'd had a baby in this time, and she did a lot of telehealth. So, and she was not, as far as I can see, helping former prisoners, like life, she didn't sound like she had a heavy duty practice. But, there's so many elements to the story, even though let's say somebody was stalking her, whatever, a crazed patient, some enemy of hers, why would that person choose a Saturday afternoon to come in and stab her in the chest when we know the husband was there at least in the morning? He had a full-time job, 5 days a week. If somebody were out to get her, wouldn't they go during the week to kill her?
You would think. Saturdays are family time typically, especially when you have a small child at home. Speaking of, where was the baby in all of this?
We think that she was in the house. He found her in the second floor bedroom, and I don't believe
Brooke.
Brooke, yeah,
Not the baby. Yeah,
right. He found Brooke, his wife, in the second floor, and I don't recall. You've heard the 911 call, right?
I have questions.
Yeah.
I have lots of questions.
I don't remember or recall that he said anything about
Nothing.
the baby in that
Not
call.
a word. That was
Right.
my next question to you. I am completely flummoxed about where this baby was in all of this, because in this extraordinarily long call, he never once says, oh my God, I have a baby in the house. Oh my God, there's a madman. Oh my God, I got to go find my baby.
Yeah.
Somebody help me, please. Not a mention at all of the baby.
That's also an incredibly good point, Ashleigh. I mean, if he'd be number one, thank God my baby's okay, whatever, or
Yes.
something about that. And you'd also think he'd be afraid that whoever did this was lurking in a closet or in the backyard or could be anywhere. There's nothing said about that at all. I mean, that 911 call, it was one of the more unusual ones I have heard in my life.
So let's talk about that, because I did an episode and played the call, and I asked for people to let me, know what they thought in the comments, and we'll play a little bit of that here too. And the comments, understandably were pretty mixed, like bullshit, and poor guy. But a lot of people found it at the beginning to make sense, and then as it went on, it was almost as though thou dost protest too much. This doesn't quite make sense. You're finding a laceration so long after the fact. Like, there should have been blood everywhere and you should have seen that immediately. I mean, none of it really, I don't know, it didn't pass muster for me. Let's face it. I cover some of the darkest crimes out there, but let me tell you, some of the scariest stuff is happening quietly right behind your screen. Your name, your phone number, your home address. It's all floating out there online, and it is not because you gave it away. It's because somebody sold it. Data brokers are tracking you. They know what you buy, what you search, what meds you take. They even know where your kids go to school. One phone call and suddenly you're wiring money to somebody who sounds exactly like your own child or your mom. This is pretty chilling stuff, but here's what most people don't know. You actually have the legal right to make your data brokers delete your info. Problem is, doing it yourself could take years, and that's why I use Incogni. Incogni does all that dirty work for me. They go straight to these companies and they demand that they remove my personal data. They even offer a custom plan, unlimited. You flag a site that's exposing your info and Incogni's privacy team goes after it directly. This is not just peace of mind, this is power. So if privacy matters to you, and it should, go to incogni.com/dropdeadserious and then use my code DROPDEAD and I got you 60% off. You're welcome. Again, that's incogni.com/dropdead. Use the code DROPDEAD to start taking your data off the market today.
Well, the chronology of it was so peculiar because if you were the dispatcher or just hearing the beginning of that call, you would think it was a woman in cardiac distress or cardiac arrest. And he asks very early on for CPR instructions. And then it's like burying the lead, then says there's blood everywhere. And, oh, I see a laceration. You know, a million people have mocked that word laceration, which sounds like something from Grey's Anatomy. I mean, it's sort of an unlikely word for most people to use when their loved one has been stabbed. It sounds like in the heart or in the chest. It was very peculiar, but I also think that the lack of discussion about the baby and the apparent lack of fear or curiosity about who might have done this is really lacking in that call.
Yeah, I mean, listen, put yourself in a man's shoes. He comes in and finds his wife bloody, stabbed, dead in the bedroom, and there's a baby in the house somewhere. The very first thing you would think he would do is, where's my daughter? Where's my child? And be calling 911 maybe as you're looking for the baby and saying to 911, I have a baby here. Come and protect me. Help us. My God, I don't know who did this. I don't know if he's still in the house. I have to get out of the house, but I need to protect there'd be a million competing terrors in this man's head. But there's nothing to indicate that there was a baby anywhere in this picture. Now, alternatively, picture if he did it, he's not the least bit concerned because he knows exactly where the baby is and he knows exactly where the bad guy is.
Yeah. There's always possibilities, right? And this couple, Brooke and Conor, apparently lived with her parents in their and it's a really big, lovely estate in Chester, when they moved back to town, probably before they closed on their house, moved in there, I don't know, but they were with the parents for a time. So there's always a possibility that baby might have been being babysat at the parents' house. You know, I don't know. One of the neighbors told me, this is interesting, they knew Conor, the neighbors, slightly, not well, never saw Brooke, ever. And in fact said it was very quiet there. I mean, some of the neighbors wondered about any kind of domestic violence, but it was the opposite of a house where there was screaming and yelling, anything like that. Mm-hmm. So, and apparently they saw a car there that they thought occasionally saw a car and they thought maybe it was her mother coming to help her with the baby. We don't know. So there's always, and the baby now is, from what I know, with the parents, Brooke's parents in Chester Township.
Yeah, well, that would make sense. And that is an alternative that, I hadn't considered, that maybe on a Saturday, the baby is with Brooke's parents, but Brooke's home and the baby, it's possible, but it's just unlikely. You use your parents as much as you can for some childcare, but typically when you really need to, like my husband's at work, I've got to go do errands, I've got a meeting, I've got something, I've got clients. On a Saturday, once again, it would be strange, not impossible. It would be strange and again, not a mention of the baby. Meaning, he could have said, we have a young daughter. She's at my parents, or she's at Brooke's parents right now, but I don't know how this happened or who could have possibly done this. It's just a lot of what? Oh my God.
I'd be so paranoid.
What the hell happened,
I actually really don't know how I would handle coming back and seeing a loved one. I actually do not know how I would handle that.
Right.
I don't know how
Me
I would
neither.
handle that. But I think that that the whole not talking about the baby, not showing any fear is just, it doesn't make any sense. Now, the other, and this is just an unverified rumor I've heard, is he has a, quote, strong alibi. Now, a neighbor, at least one neighbor told me they saw him outside the house on Saturday morning. So we know that he was there. And the rumor is he went to the hardware store or the auto parts store or something like that. But first of all, how long a trip can that be, right? And, you know, if when you're living in Chester, if you're going to go somewhere, you know, you do need to drive a bit, but not that far. So how long could he have been gone to pick up whatever he was picking up? Again, we don't know that's his alibi, but I have heard that he has one. But even so, as you know, someone can kill someone. They're in the house for maybe 45 minutes, you go, come back, and then say, you know, I mean, there's all sorts of things that can be manipulated with an alibi, right?
I actually remember a case up in Vermont, Brattleboro. This was a long time ago, like 20 years. Hope Greiner. She was an older woman, I think in her late 70s or 80s. So was her husband. And the allegation against her was, you killed him, and then you went out and did your errands and came back and discovered him dead in the driveway. So it's not as though you can't create a good alibi. Maybe the murder happened the night before. Maybe it was date night and the baby was sleeping over. Who knows? There's all sorts of possibilities. And then there's the possibility of the boogeyman, which so few of us ever believe until Elizabeth Smart was taken by a boogeyman.
Right. Yeah. You covered that one, didn't you? I remember you being out there with your clipboard. I can still see that for some reason on MSNBC.
5 weeks. 5 weeks I was in Salt Lake covering that story, yes.
Wow, 5 weeks. That was incredible. That was. Yet her poor father was thought to be, right? Didn't they think he did it? Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, the only thing in his favor, Conor Hanlon, is he hasn't come out and done the fake grieving father thing. But he's got to know that he's being smeared all over social media. Of course, everyone, he did it, and he doesn't seem, and what is it's Morris County Prosecutor's Office, what are they doing that they're saying so little? Building an airtight case against him or someone else?
Well, this is the confounding thing, right? Like early on in a case, and like again, we've been around the block on these murder cases and true crime cases. It's harmless to say that someone has died and a name attached. That's not going to impugn anybody. It's not going to compromise the case in a trial that may follow. Certain evidence, of course, they have to hold that back. We're used to that. But the basics, like names, dates, times, that I've just never seen this happen. And I'm curious about, like, what did they said to the neighbors? Like, nothing to see here, you're all safe? Because I've seen that before in Idaho, bullshit, and in Nancy Guthrie, bullshit. There was ample reason for everyone to be concerned. What are they saying here?
I think Alex Murdoch, too, they said there's no danger to the public in the beginning, right? And then all of a sudden a reward and a tip line a week later. I mean, it makes these people, didn't they get even associate degrees in criminology? I don't know. But the neighbors are calm, but very, very concerned and very, very, like one neighbor, when I showed up, which was just 3 weeks, said to me, I thought like all the media would be here. She expected a whole media mob, a true crime media mob. Yeah. Nobody ever came. And partly, I think by not identifying Brooke and just having this unidentified person, it just went under the radar, over the radar of most people. And both sets of neighbors were genuinely scared. I mean, they still really are when they saw him, when they saw his car, at least. I mean, I've checked very carefully, did you see him in that car? And I think one of the neighbors said, the outline of whatever, I don't know. But they don't understand why the cops have never questioned, like one side of the neighbor has never been questioned. One on one side, never. Crazy. And the other one 3 times, only after I showed up. I then also, actually, I went to Boston because Conor Hanlon is from Boston. And he's got a big Irish family in the Boston area. And I literally went around door knocking on a whole bunch of them. And that was interesting in that, his uncle, his aunts, and they would come to the door, very cordial. And I would go through my spiel saying I'm Dana Kennedy with the Daily Mail. And quick as a wink, they ended the conversation, but in a weird way. And more than one of them did this. They said, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. Or I don't know who that is. I mean, it's his uncle. And, all you
Are you kidding? Wait, they would deny knowing anything about this story?
Yeah, they did. One of them said, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. And then I seemed one of the other ones I asked is, "Are you his aunt or whatever?" And I believe she said it once. She got confused. At first, she said, "Yeah," and they said, "Well, I don't know who you're talking about." It was very peculiar. I did talk to another aunt who was nice and talked to me at length. Said she loved Brooke and that never saw any trouble between Conor and Brooke. No tension, no domestic violence, no nothing, and that he was, a great guy, and she didn't believe for a minute that he could have done it. And she also brought up the idea of a mental patient or something like that.
Well, when you're starting to bring up ideas, that's when people start to smell a rat, like offering up who else could have done this. But, not to say that it means anything, but generally it's an unusual thing for people to offer up. First of all, do we know if the police ever said anything to any of the neighbors about don't be concerned, there's no cause for alarm, or did they say lock your doors?
I believe they said, I'm going back a few weeks here since I was out there, Ash, but I believe both sets of neighbors said to me that the cops essentially, in words to this degree, said there's no danger to the public. Yeah, not for 1 minute did they say lock your doors, because one neighbor has a child, and is understandably concerned about that, as another neighbor who lives by herself, so no, they were never told to lock their doors. And, I actually honestly keep thinking, are we missing something, Ashleigh? Are we missing why the Morris County prosecutors are so tight-lipped? And, he appears to be, the husband is driving his car. We see him in Boston. We see him back in New Jersey. I don't know if he's still at that job. If you call the job, he still has an answering voicemail there, It just, I keep thinking, and we may be missing something, but it just seems really odd. I mean, this woman, I also talked to her former roommate from many years ago, and Brooke did not sound like the kind of person that made enemies. She did not sound like a controversial, difficult person with a shady past or problems or feuds with anybody.
What about theft? Like, was there forced entry? Was there theft from the home? Not suggesting we're going to know this, but is there rumblings or any inclination that might have been what was afoot?
That's a good question, and I don't know. It's never come up, and since, Morris County's not talking, we have no way of knowing. Like I said, it was eerie to look into the living room. And again, I wasn't doing this. I thought they were home. I mean, I was literally knocking on the front door, and then peered in. It was so eerie because it was like a playpen kind of up, half tipped over. I have to assume, I guess it was the cops going through the house, probably looking for the murder weapon. I mean, that's my guess, that there's no murder weapon to be found, right?
Well, so far nothing. I mean, we don't know. We can barely get a name on this, let alone any kind of detail that would, help to sort of sort out what was going on there. But there's a state park that's near the house.
Yeah.
Is there some discussion that maybe this was someone from the state park, and just because they happened to be the closest house, it was an opportunistic crime?
Well, that's another really good question. It wasn't necessarily the closest to it, but it's a really kind of eerie horror movie road in a way. I mean, beautiful in a way, but like it's paved, right? And then when you head into where the Hanlon Haggerty house was, it becomes all gravel, which is weird. And then you go into this, it's something, a Huckle Park or something like that. And that's not the right name for it. And there's no cell service to add to the sort of horror movie kind of aspect, because I was calling somebody while there and couldn't get through. That is possible. I mean, people, as you know all too well, like parks, state parks, national parks are like almost like breeding grounds for crazy people. Yeah, could it have been an absolute madman or madwoman in the park that just came by and decided to go into a house and kill someone? That's possible, but then why not say her name?
Yeah. Well, I remember a case, I'm trying to remember if it was Texas, there was an escaped prisoner who stabbed the prison bus driver, escaped out, and then killed a family in a house near, totally
random, yeah.
Horrible. So it's not like it didn't happen. It's not like there aren't
there is still the piece that I'm considering that we don't know, a piece, because of how strangely it's been handled and how the father spoke to me and how he is so polite and so cordial despite what this, and said, wonderful things about his daughter, and clearly loved her very much. But to be honest, you think if there was any hint that his son-in-law did it, that it would be hard for him to be so calm and unemotional about that with me.
Also, as I think more about it, I don't know why I didn't think of it right away when you mentioned it. Why do the grandparents have baby Avery? Why doesn't Dad have his baby?
I don't know. Of course, to be completely fair, he may have her now. There's even the possibility, Ashleigh, that he's living with the parents. I mean, nothing would surprise me if there's something that we don't know and there is a madman lurking around that was in that park. The only thing is, I don't understand why being so quiet about the case, if that is the situation, either a madman or she had some enemy and a crazy stalker ex-boyfriend that I've talked to a fair amount of people that knew her. Why not? What's the secret? How is that going to endanger the case to say that?
Well,
to clear that publicly.
Yeah, the public is usually one of the best resources to get tips in a case, like the Tepe murders. And so if there's a madman out there, it is strictly astounding that the police wouldn't say, hey, everyone, we need all tips, Nancy Guthrie style. Everybody, if you've seen anything, if you a strange vehicle this night or that morning, please come forward. And crickets.
I tell you, it's so strange.
Usually it's crickets when they know who they're looking for.
Yeah. But to go back to my earlier parallel with the Murdaugh case, which doesn't really make sense here, but it keeps reminding me of it in that you had the sense that they probably did know from day one who they probably were dealing with, but they were so weird and cagey. In the Murdaugh's case, I really think that they were so used to running that county or two counties, they thought nobody was going to show up, and if so, they just, they were not living in reality. But this guy has no serious juice. He does not come from a powerful family. I mean, not to be rude, but I think Brooke really, he married up when he married Brooke. And his parents aren't anybody with any kind of juice to, have any kind of power over anybody. So it's truly a mystery. But I keep hedging my bets and saying, is there some piece that we don't know? But I mean, you do this 24/7. I do this kind of story, but other stuff as well, that you live and breathe this. So when I say to you, what could that piece be other than mental patient, crazy park person? I don't know.
I mean, crazy park person would say to me that the police would be begging the public and all the neighbors, give us every tip you have. We're flummoxed by it. And actually, that brings me to the Nancy Guthrie story. Cameras were not helpful in Nancy Guthrie's case, other than her ring cam capture, which saw, this presumable killer. And in this particular case, I'm wondering if it's the same sort of rural situation where cameras at a neighbor's house wouldn't have helped.
Yeah, because it is. I was in Tucson for a week, so I know the geography of the Nancy Guthrie home. I mean, you couldn't be two completely separate kinds of geographical locations, but you're right. They're both really rural. However, I would say in this case, these neighbors seemed extraordinarily conscious of what was going on there. Like when I drove in, again, it's a regular road that people try. I went to the murder house first, then I went to go see these neighbors, and they saw that I had driven by and thought I might be a reporter, so I was, and again, these are houses that are, set off a bit from the road, so they did seem to be conscious of it, but someone could certainly, there's all sorts of trails, Ashleigh, in this area, right? Like people that live there like to go hiking in the trails behind the houses and all over the place, so it's actually more rural than where Nancy Guthrie lives.
But might have a house have captured a vehicle, either Friday night or Saturday morning or Saturday afternoon on a ring cam, or is it like a hard pass that they're going to capture it?
Well, I know that the cops did ask the one neighbor right after it for ring camera footage. So again, if they thought that but that could be, even if they thought that the husband did it, they could still want, further proof. And they, as I told you earlier, they didn't have their ring camera. They do now, but they didn't have it working then. And I don't know about the other neighbors. I mean, I know the other one, it wouldn't have been in the position to see anything. And of course, we don't know, we don't know.
What about flock?
I would say from talking to the neighbors, it'd be very unlikely for there to have been a third car that afternoon that pulled up. I think they were just very aware of it. And they thought Conor was a little odd also.
Ah, that's interesting. But to be clear, just so I know what I'm dealing with, the way the houses are situated in this neighborhood, if someone has a ring cam, it will see vehicles.
Yeah, it'll see yes, I think it would certainly see vehicles to some on the street. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's helpful.
Yeah. But not easily. It's not like, where I am in Manhattan, it's not
Sure.
that linear and whatever.
Yeah. Well, listen, if it happened in the middle of the night, like in Nancy Guthrie, presumably Conor was there, so he would have known that it happened. If it happened in the broad daylight when Conor was off and then came home, something should be visible. But again, the police aren't saying, be on the lookout for this car.
I know, it's so strange. I'm just like, I just, I hope something breaks, because it's kind of preys upon people's minds, including me, It's just, I would love there to be some kind of closure. And one reason why I wanted to do the story was I felt like Brooke Hanlon deserved to be identified, at some point. It was almost like it was being swept under the carpet. Very, very, and the caginess of everybody. I can't, that's a word. Even the relatives in Boston were like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. I mean, it was like,
that's just weird. Yeah, you
weird.
know what I'm talking about. Your family member is in the middle of a horror show. So to say I don't know what you're talking about is definitely a red flag. Yeah. Well, I think if anybody's going to find something out, I think it's going to be Dana Kennedy who's going to find something out, because you're very good at what you do, my dear.
Yeah, so are you, Ashleigh.
Well, thank you for doing this, and let's keep up on this. Like, let's connect. Text me, call me, and then come back on the podcast.
I will. Okay.
My great thanks to Dana Kennedy. We remain lifelong friends. Like I said, we've been through some things together. But I think, Dana's going to follow this. And if anyone can get the information, Dana can. And if she can't, I feel like none of us can, which is weird in itself. I think we might just have to wait for the next shoe to drop. But I will be here to bring you that shoe. I will call Dana back and ask her what she finds. I've got her on speed dial. And I'll make sure I bring you all the latest. But you got to subscribe if you want to make sure you don't miss any of the details and developments in this case, because something tells me there could be a flood. At some point, a flood of them has to come. There's got to be something. Can't do nothing. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Thanks, everyone, for watching. And remember, truth isn't just serious. It's drop dead serious.